So welcome everyone. Wanted to go over a few technical details to make sure everyone can get to the tools that they would like. Today's session is being recorded, as you just heard. If you would like to use closed captioning and see that during the presentation, you'll see there is a little icon that says CC in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. In addition, you can enable the question and answer option or view the closed captioning transcript by clicking on the three dots that are in the lower right-hand side of your screen. During the session, feel free to add questions to the chat. I'll be monitoring those. At the end of the presentation, I will be unmuting all of our participants and open the floor for questions. We will have time for those. So thank you so much for being with us today to learn more about how your organization can measure inclusion in the workplace and why it's so important. My name is Michelle Bellinger, and I am a member of Virginia Ability's Board of Directors. If you're not familiar with Virginia Ability, we are a nonprofit organization who partners with businesses to help them with their disability inclusion efforts. We do this by hosting educational sessions like today's webinar. We link job seekers with career opportunities, and we help to empower businesses to act by connecting them with employment support agencies. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Felicia Nurmsen of the National Organization on Disability, or NOD. She is a Managing Director of Employment Services. Felicia is a member of the executive management team and leads the development and delivery of NOD's suite of professional services. The employment tracker. What's that?
That's great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thanks.
You're welcome. If you want, I'll go through the whole thing. It's really impressive.
No, that is fine. Thank you. Okay. I appreciate that so much. I know we had just a few minutes where we're starting a little bit late, so thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm not sure if Margaret, looks like Margaret has the content ready to go, so take it away.
Excellent. So thank you again, Virginia Ability, for having me here today. To absolutely appreciate it. I will date myself and say that I was involved with the BLNs, right? The USBLN. So I'm dating myself there, I know, before it was disability. And before we get started, my pronouns are she and her. And I am a white woman with shoulder-length blonde hair, black-rimmed glasses. And today, what you can see of my shirt, it's like an off-white, and it has different color flowers. And I didn't notice this before, but it actually has like a little metallic gold string that goes through it. I am a person with a disability. I am hard of hearing. My favorite accessories are my hearing aids, as well as I do live with anxiety and depression. So we have a lot to cover today as far as both the Disability Employment Tracker is concerned, and I will talk just a little bit about other assessments and really why they're important to use as a tool as it relates to our disability inclusion within the workplace. Next slide, please. I do want to make everyone aware that we will have a poll that is a yes or no poll. Margaret can keep me honest here, who is advancing the slides. If we're not able to have that poll, that's fine. But I will ask the question just for you to answer as we move forward. So today we really are exploring findings and trends from the 2022 tracker, last year's employment tracker, and we'll dig into new analysis by Talmetrics, which is our national partner, as well as share for the first time ever that we're able to link practices to talent outcomes as of last year. So we'll go over some key insights there. We also will hear from, we're hoping, we have a video of Mark Templin, who is the president of Toyota North America's finances. Toyota, I'm so sorry, I don't know why I'm becoming tongue-tied here. I deal with them on a regular basis. But if we can, we will hear from him about how Toyota has used the tracker internally to help them with their workplace inclusion. Here are our learning objectives. As you see, we want to explore the most important disability employment practices that lead to the strongest results, identify critical gaps that remain and how your company can successfully address them, and then we'll take a high-level look at the changes in the 2023 NOD Employment Tracker, which now features enhanced questions around mental health in the workplace, as well as digital accessibility. Next slide, please. So for those of you joining us that have not, that are not aware of NOD, have not had an experience with NOD, I would like to share just a bit of our background. So as you see here, NOD's strategic approach is based on 3 pillars. Through our innovation programs and the tracker, we have the ability to analyze data collected over the last 10 years through our experience in programs like our Wounded Warriors career, where we demonstrated 2 times the success rate of our transition of any other transition program for veterans with disabilities transitioning into the workplace. Our Bridges to a Better Workforce was recognized as the most successful model for hiring people with disabilities. And now we have the opportunity to work through with NIDLR, which is the National Institute. I did write it down because I can never remember what it is. National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research, where we are working with several different universities as well as our client partners to have a better understanding around culture, mental health, mental illness, and digital accessibility in the workplace. What we do is we find, we frame the conversation, right? Familiar concepts seen in a new way. Look Closer, we have blogs. Look Closer was a campaign that we did a few years ago that really helped us to look internally with our leadership council members and help to feature employees that they have with disabilities that are obviously very successful and doing really well and sharing what they went through in order to be where they are today. We have earned media, paid digital media, etc. All of those things that I'm sure you know of, you're aware of. We participate in events like this, speaking engagements, all of the above. Then use that to help us to influence disability employment policy in many different ways. Make sure that proven practices can link to those federal policies. Current priorities are the home care bill that is currently, hopefully, moving through Congress, as well as the sub-minimum wage that we convened a roundtable of 15 of the largest disability organizations in the country to work with us on understanding how we can continue to ensure that states are not giving any more, that we're not using sub-minimum wage to pay people with disabilities. Also, we just recently had a meeting with the U.S. Department of Labor's Secretary, Marty Walsh, Marty, if you're from Massachusetts, like I am, and talked about enforcement of 503. What were the plans to help to continue to enforce 503 and include other areas as far as focus is concerned when we knew we were doing focused reviews through OFCCP. So it was a really fantastic meeting. So let's move to the next slide, please. Here you can see, so in addition to our employment tracker, we do have several different tools that companies can use, can engage with us as far as working together to either help with building a disability inclusion strategy or helping you to really expand and be considered an employer of choice for people with disabilities. That's through our NOD Leadership Council, as you see here, and hoping that by changing our goal is that by changing practices, we will be able to, at a larger scale, we will be able to have a larger impact within the community overall. Next slide, please. Now we'll talk about the tracker. So first of all, I would like to ask how many of you have completed the tracker, are familiar with the tracker? I think you can go ahead and use the chat if you'd like. Okay, I do see that some have not, and excellent. Thank you so much for putting your responses in the chat. I do greatly appreciate that. So this will be a great opportunity for you to learn about the tracker and how you can use that internally to help you. Next slide, please. So here's a little bit more about the employment tracker. We have redesigned NOD's free benchmarking tool with a focus on helping employers increase self-ID rates and improve employment results. We do that. Oh, I'm so sorry. I am not able to see the slide. Hold on. I'm just having some technical difficulties. I love technology when it works. When it doesn't, that is, I wasn't able to hear earlier. So now I am, okay, here we go. I'm back. I apologize. So you get a free scorecard when you complete the tracker that benchmarks your performance against all other companies, as well as those the top quartile of employers. All employers that complete the tracker do receive that scorecard. Leadership Council members receive an extended scorecard that includes some additional insights. You can also contact us to have us go through your scorecard with you if you would like and help you to take a deeper dive into your strengths as well as where you may have some opportunities. Connect practices to outcomes. As I said, we were very excited last year when the changes that we made did allow us to connect those leading practices and business practices to outcomes and then measure your ability to attract, retain, hire, promote people with disabilities, not just looking at your self-ID rate. And then track your year-over-year progress, able to demonstrate gains, and again, look to see where you may have some opportunities and chart the course for short, mid, and long-term disability inclusion goals. Next slide, please. Here are the 6 workforce inclusion categories. I'm just using this to level set. You see, we look at everything from strategy to workplace tools and accountability. Talent outcome metrics was the new category that we brought in 2021 to help us to look at people with disabilities within the life cycle as far as their employment is concerned. Next slide, please. And here you see that life cycle: attract, recruit, engage, really reporting out as far as those categories are concerned. Next slide, please. Here are the 2022 tracker improvements that we made. Talent outcomes analysis includes everything that you see there in the blue box, not only measuring self-ID rates, but those job applicants, retention of people with disabilities, high potential employees, which is something that we do track for our other marginalized populations within the workplace. And we'll see a little bit more about the differences in tracking as far as our other populations are concerned. But here you can see the changes that we made. Next slide, please. So when you take the tracker, you can opt in to be considered for NOD's leading disability employer, as well as it is a requirement for Diversity Inc.'s top 50s list. Luke Visconti, who is the chairman of Diversity Inc. and the founder, sits on our board of directors and he is a person with a disability himself, is very vocal about that, and does understand that disability really needs to be included as a pillar of your DEI strategies. Next slide, please. All right, now we're going to go over some key insights for you. But before we do, I do want to just talk about some of the other tools that are out there, because there are several not trackers, but several surveys that you can use. Some are like PYD, which is the Partners for Youth with Disabilities that we partnered with for our Campus to Careers program just recently. Fantastic organization that has focused on youth from the very beginning. They do have what they consider an assessment specifically for those early employees, right? Those employees that may be entering the workplace as, as a new employee for the first time. So that may be something to consider. You can go onto their website and see that. There's also our ability, which is not only do they have a national job board that they offer, they're another ability, um, just like Virginia Ability. It's John Robinson, and he actually has uh, Section 508 and ADA accessibility testing and remediation that he offers. So there are some that are very broad, looking at disability inclusion in the workplace, some just looking at accessibility. There is a customized, completely customized assessment from Understood, which is most likely they are really looking at education and students on the autism spectrum. So that may be helpful for companies that are looking for that type of support. And then, of course, there is the DEI, Disability Equality Index through Disability In, which looks at not only the workplace, but also marketplace and supplier diversity. Very important. We at NOG definitely recommend that companies take other surveys and assessments. It helps to give you that broader view of how you're doing, and particularly things that look at those other areas that we do not. We do know that we stand apart from the other assessments and surveys because it is very specific to the workplace. And we have been intentional with that, believing that and knowing from our own experience of being, we had our 40th anniversary last year, but knowing that the workplace continues to be a great challenge for people with disabilities. But ultimately, you want to understand how you can be part of supplier diversity programs, as well as the value of people with disabilities as far as the marketplace is concerned. There's also a newer, I don't want to say newer, it is relatively new, benchmarkability, which is through the Yang Chan Institute at Cornell University. That was funded by NIDLR, which I talked about earlier, which we're participating in a different grant. But that is, it's broken down into components, which could potentially be much easier for companies to complete because you can pick and choose out of 6 different components which components are most important to you at any given time, which I do think that could be very easy. Unfortunately, I do not have any more information on that tool. I do not have any clients that are currently completing that in addition to the other surveys that they're using. And why is it important? For so many reasons. Number one, if you do opt in, I know that this is very difficult for some of us. If you do opt in to be part of the awards and announcements, it really does help you to be seen as an employer of choice for people with disabilities. And ultimately, it helps you to understand where you are with disability inclusion and where you're going. If you don't know where you're starting from, you absolutely can't get to where you want to go if you don't have a starting point. I think we always used to say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And now I think it's more around, since we really do rely on data so much, if you don't measure it, it doesn't exist. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about those assessments that you're taking and how you can use them internally, really to help you in various areas. Next slide, please. So our key insights on self-ID at 72%, self-ID rates remain the most widely reported talent outcome among all participating companies. We did see a decrease in the self-ID rate again this year. It was a 15% decrease as opposed to 11% last year. I do think that that may be on the next slide, but top quartile companies have a self-ID rate 50% greater than all participating companies because they are looking at other areas, some of those other metrics. Legacy tracker takers, which are those companies that continue to take the tracker year over year and can track their progress, have an 8% higher ID rate than those other companies. Next slide, please. So again, it just shows how you can use the tracker to really help you to understand how you're moving along that continuum. Measuring what matters. Companies that track those talent outcomes, as I just said, additional talent outcome metrics beyond self-ID have higher self-ID rates. Now, measuring is not the be it and end all, right? That just because you're measuring something does not mean that you are going to improve unless you actually take action. That's why some of us aren't particularly interested in surveys, because we know at some point we'll be employee surveys is what I should say. At some point we'll be ready to take action. We still are in that strategy and exploration phase, so we don't want to have be collecting that information if we're not ready to take action. So that's what we mean when measure matters. 74% of companies are tracking talent outcome metrics for diversity, but only 43% are tracking those same metrics for people with disabilities. So again, when we're tracking for diversity, we mean our other marginalized populations within the organization, which is incredibly important. This is not a competition. You should not lose one so that you can include disability. We are absolutely committed to ensuring that disability has a seat at the table. Disability inclusion should be part of your diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging strategy and be a pillar of that, knowing what we do as far as people having multiple marginalized identities. So I'm not just a person with a disability. I am also a white woman. I am also, gender, everything that goes with that. When we look at the breakdown of some of those populations, it really becomes quite harrowing when you understand how the intersectionality of disability affects our other marginalized populations within the workplace, more apt to be in poverty, more apt to be without housing. So it definitely is a point to keep in mind as you think about your DEI strategy and how you look at disability, what lens you are using to understand and to look at disability. We also see here that companies with senior leaders that are open about their own disabilities have self-ID rates 2 times higher than all participating companies. We have known this, I think anecdotally, many of us that have been doing this for a number of years have known this. However, now we have the data to show that it is directly correlated to increased self-ID rates, because if you can see yourself, and especially if you can see yourself in that CEO role, then you feel more comfortable being able to identify as a person with a disability. Next slide, please. Practices that correlate to increased self-ID rates. I just told you one of them is the senior leader being out, that you have sources, you're sourcing disability talent through colleges, universities, and community partners. We think that this point, as far as colleges and university is concerned, and we just, as I said earlier, we do have a Campus to Careers program that we did 4 years in Massachusetts. We will be releasing our report in April, but really important to understand that that is low-hanging fruit. You're already on the campus. So let's ensure that you are including students with disabilities in that strategy.
I'm going to pause you for just a second, Felicia. We have a question in the chat. One of our
Okay.
attendees is asking if you can please define self-ID rate.
Yes, and that is such a great question. Thank you so much, Michelle. Self-ID rate. So uh, there are two kind of self-ID disclosure, if you will, for a person with a disability. We consider self-ID as part of that application process when we're asking about our other demographics, right? So are you female or male, or choose not to answer? Hopefully some of us are starting to include our other categories for gender, as well as are you a veteran? You will be asked most times whether or not, well, I shouldn't say most times because it was only 38% of the companies are tracking self-ID rates, but checking the box, right? Completely, that does not go to your human resources file. It is not housed anywhere that anyone would have access to that information. It is completely private. Disclosure, however, and self-ID rate, again, is that what companies look at from the hiring process, and then they may, if you're a federal contractor particularly, you ask prior to, during the application process, after you have been hired, and then every 5 years thereafter, you're asking employees to self-identify, check the box that they are a person with a disability. Disclosure is different for me. Disclosure is actually having the conversation. You are either very comfortable with your disability, as as I said, I disclosed right away. I am a person with a disability. It was not always easy for me to disclose that I had a mental health disability, that I have anxiety and depression. That is very recent for me. And anytime you may need to have an accommodation or an adjustment for productivity within the workplace is when you would need to disclose your disability if you do not feel like before it really affects your talent and performance within the workplace. I hope that's helpful. And here we see companies tracking. I'm going to go back to this slide here as far as practices that correlate to increased self-ID rates. And my company tracks the ratio of individuals with disabilities hired to all hires. Again, this just goes back to that talent, the life cycle of talent within the organization, and ensuring that we do understand where our people with disabilities are going and how they're moving through the workplace. Next slide, please. Retention begins at recruitment. This is something, again, from an HR perspective, talent acquisition, all of us have known for years that it is that first touch with an organization that makes all the difference. You may decide in that moment that, yes, this is absolutely a position that I'm interested in. Not sure if this is an organization that I would like to continue to grow with, or whether or not there is an opportunity for me to continue to grow. Looking at companies who intentionally source talent from disability sourcing channels have more positive outcomes throughout the employee life cycle. You can see, I'm not going to go through all of the bullets on this slide. I'll let you read that. However, what's most important about that is when you are working with those organizations, that your self-ID, as well as the person's experience within the workplace, will be much different because you are aware that that person has a disability. They may come in and you know what their accommodation is, what their accommodation request might be, or that they don't require an accommodation at all. But the point is that you have a much closer relationship with that service agency, with that sourcing channel, to understand what the population looks like that are coming in, and you already know that they are a person with a disability. Ultimately, what we would love to see, and this is something that we talked about when I was at Manpower Group, I come from the corporate side, and we'd always say that we would just love it to be part of our pipeline. just a natural piece of our pipeline that people with disabilities are coming in, and we know that. We don't need to have that extra step of working either directly with a service provider unless there's an issue, and an issue could be, again, not sure what type of accommodation to make. Um, that's the direction we should all be moving in, right? I would like to be out of a job. Next slide, please. Mentorship matters. This one for me, NOD was involved with the National Disability Mentoring Coalition for a number of years. I had been involved for a number of years. A great organization. If you're not familiar with them, please do look them up because they do have some really great resources as far as creating programs, mentoring programs specific to people with disabilities in the workplace. Mentoring matters for a lot of reasons. However, the first one is that when we can mentor and we have a mentoring program specifically for people with disabilities, we do know that that works as far as career development is concerned, right? We're working with another member of the staff, usually in a leadership position or in a position that you aspire to. And we get to understand, right, side by side, working with that person, really understanding what it is within the organization that we can look forward to as a person with a disability. Another practice that is really successful when we think about mentorship is the reverse mentoring. Having somebody who is a leader within the organization paired with someone who is a disability so that they can see that disability is just a part of our identity. It does not, it's not the sum of who I am. It's just a part of that. They get to experience that, seeing how we're working in the organization and having that experience over a period of time versus just maybe that one, you may come in contact with someone once. Also taking into consideration that 74% of disabilities are non-apparent and 83% are a result of age, illness, or injury. So we have the opportunity to join that this crowd at any time. Next slide, please. Efficient and accessible accommodation practices are key. This is a point that really was made very, I did a management training 2 years ago for our leadership council companies, as well as others. It was open, I believe. And it was less than 10% of the respondents when I did a poll within um, the presentation of how do you know how to find your accommodation process or policy. That was disheartening, right? We want to ensure that our managers, supervisors, senior leaders are empowered with the knowledge and information that they need in order to enter into the interactive process with a team member and be confident in that, knowing that they're not the one that is going to make the decision as far as the disability, the accommodation request is concerned, that there will be a team. The interactive process includes the person that has requested the accommodation, that person's supervisor or manager, as well as HR. And potentially you could involve the person's medical professional to the degree of either you're not sure that the disability meets the ADA requirements, or this person can be very helpful in identifying what may be the best accommodation. It should not be considered a scary process for our employees. It absolutely needs to be something that they can feel comfortable with, because as many times as we say, and we will say it, that you need to go to HR, I'm going to my manager. I'm going to my supervisor. That is the person that I have the most contact with. That is the person that I am going to go to when I have to disclose that I have a disability. So let's make sure that those employees are empowered with the knowledge that they need. Next slide, please. We always love to give a shout out to our Leadership Council companies because they continue to outperform other companies within that are continued to take the tracker. Our Leadership Council members have um, track all 10 of the talent outcome metrics at a higher rate, 8% higher than all other companies. They have 10% more people with disabilities represented in promotions, as well as 93% of our Leadership Council members have an employee resource group for people with disabilities, versus 78% for non-Leadership Councils. You also see that they have a higher self-ID rate. I think I referred to that earlier. Next slide, please. Areas of greatest year-over-year improvement. So there are some things here that may really seem apparent, right, to you. You're doing this, you understand disability in the workplace overall. However, looking at some things that may not seem to matter as much, it is really revising, looking at your short and long-term disability policies and programs. We did see 57% versus 33% for last year, which is fantastic. We do want to be looking at those policies and process to ensure that they are up to date with the most recent information. Work directly with personnel at colleges who are focused on disability inclusion services. This was a huge increase. 69% of the companies said yes, they are working with disability services offices, career service offices to make that connection to disability service offices versus 18% in 2021. That is fantastic. Again, if you'd like to learn more about our Campus to Careers program, we are having a webinar in April, and we will be releasing our report with several different materials that can help you, videos as well as a playbook that we put together with the Burton Blatt Institute as part of the evaluation process. And you can see the others here. Encouraging requests for accommodations, really important because again, that's where kind of the rubber hits the road for people with disabilities. If they know that you're actually encouraging requests for accommodations, then they know that we're walking the walk. We're not afraid of that process. We want to ensure that all of our employees can be as productive as they can be in the workplace, as well as have equal access to opportunities within the workplace. Next slide, please. This is where we saw the greatest decline. Selecting a new workplace technology, do you consider digital accessibility as a requirement? We just had a fantastic call with one of our tracker takers before this, and we were so happy to hear that they are actually going to require any of their vendors and any of their providers to ensure that whatever it is, the platform, whatever tool it is, that it is accessible and not just meeting compliance requirements, but user friendly. Meeting compliance requirements is the floor. It's not the ceiling. There are different things that we can do as employers to ensure that it is a user friendly experience by having people with disabilities test that. If we're not hiring people with disabilities, if we're not, if we don't have a culture where people trust and have that psychological safety to self-identify, disclose, become members of our ERGs, then it makes it very difficult for us to test that internally. So we want to ensure that we are doing that ourselves. Requiring the ensure accessibility best practices are followed in all new internal employee-facing technology development. Done a fantastic job. Companies have done a fantastic job of that external client-facing technology, ensuring that that is accessible, user-friendly, and lots of course we are, right? We want to ensure that our clients can utilize all of our digital offerings easily. It does, then we have to go back internally to service our internal clients, which are our employees. We had an example of a company that we worked with on a hiring project that had someone on their on their staff that actually had someone that was helping them to put their time in because it wasn't accessible for that person because they were low vision, and had been happening for 2 years. She worked there for 2 years. Um, Part of it is if you don't know, you can't fix it. But let's make sure that we understand that our employees are our clients as well. Looking at internet and recruiting websites are compliant with Section 508 and Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Again, we don't want to see that there's a decrease in the practice adoption on any of these, but particularly as it relates to accessibility. If we can't get through the front door, you can't hire us. You're missing out on that talent, as well as, again, you could become disabled at any time. Ensure that we can get in, we can roll in as you walk in side by side. There isn't a special entrance, and we can access technology that is being utilized both within the workplace as well as externally. That is how we create equal access. Next slide, please. This is a video from Mark Templin, who is the president of Toyota North America's financial. Again, I'm having an issue. I apologize. Hopefully, we are going to be able to play it. I do think that we are having some technical issues. If not, we will ensure that it's embedded in the presentation that we will provide to Virginia Ability to go ahead and send out after this. As a presenter, if anyone here, I think probably many of us have presented, videos are the bane of our existence. Oh, we can't hear him, but it is captioned. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm not going to belabor the point. Let's move forward. Mark Templin does talk about all of the different ways that Toyota has made an investment, not only in hiring people with disabilities, but on their own internal, looking at internal process policies, et cetera. Margaret and I have been working with Toyota for 2 years now on various projects, including education, ensuring that there is education within their learning management system as it relates to people with disabilities working side by side, bias, and management topics such as interviewing, managing team members with disabilities, which a lot of it is the same, by the way. Don't need a lot of extra care in the workplace as far as managing is concerned, but there are some things that you want to be aware of, as well as performance discussions and the ADA. Next slide. This is a sample tracker scorecard. It's an excerpt. As you can see, you'll see your talent outcome metrics. The dark blue would be all companies. The middle one is top quartile companies at 49%, as well as the lightest is 36% for your company. When you see these, you do see this is exactly how you see it. It just would be some different colors that stand out a little bit more. Orange would be your company, so you could clearly see what your company is doing. Next slide, please. Now, what's new in the 2023 tracker? I'm going to be respectful of people's times. I want to be able to answer questions. I'm going to go through this very quickly. Next slide, please. Increased focus on mental health. We have a partnership with Mental Health America. We had a 4-part mental health series last year that was very well received. It had attracted thousands of people to attend. It was the most well-attended webinar series NOD has ever done in our 40-year history. This is top of mind for companies, and it is top of mind for your employees. So we work with them each year. Mental Health America does review our tracker and helps us to include some additional questions. This is the second year in a row that we have brought in additional questions around this topic. Next slide, please. Digital accessibility. We have a partnership. We have several partnerships now with digital accessibility companies to help not only us as far as the tracker is concerned, but so that we can refer them as potential partners for our leadership council members and you as well. People that do call in and ask for advice from NOD, we're very happy to work with you. You do not need to be a member, but we certainly can help you to understand the benefits of being a member. These are some of the new questions. My company has a chief accessibility officer or equivalent C-suite leader. Okay, next slide, please. How to use your tracker scorecard, build internal buy-in and support your disability inclusion strategy. We have actually worked with some companies to help them with this. I did a presentation with one of our board members, Doug Conant, who is the former CEO of Campbell Soup Companies, actually did that presentation with me, utilizing the scorecard for the company with their senior leadership members. All of their C-suite were involved, and we actually were able to secure funding for the client internally in order to continue with their disability inclusion practice and strategy. So it definitely does work. I've done it with, I just had to do it with another member. Anyway, it does work. We're happy to help you with that as well. Understand the critical success factors, really look at it from successful, how to build, use your successes to build the foundation, use the opportunities then to create those short, mid, and long-term goals. Next slide, please. We can help you to take a deep dive into your tracker results. It's called an executive briefing. You choose 3 areas that you want to focus on as a company. We take that back. We work with you to help you, again, to develop that plan. These are the 3 categories that you want to look at. These are the leading practices that companies have implemented in order to move forward in those categories, and then help you to set the goals around those practices, as well as we may want to look at and review some of your internal policies, such as job descriptions, et cetera, if you're having within the different categories of what influences success in those categories. I'm going to stop here because I would love to see if anyone has any questions. I do think that there may be a few. I think I saw something, but unfortunately I was not able to see the question.
Yes, Felicia, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I know that our organization has completed the tracker, but I have learned quite a bit from this, and it's incredibly helpful. I love the mentoring information. That's something that we definitely want to look into. And I did put in the chat to let folks know that they can either add their questions in the chat, or I think, enabled folks to unmute themselves and ask a question.
Oh, excellent.
Great. Right, one of our questions is, oh, okay, this is great. They're coming in here. So the first one is from Lori, and how can we access the tracker?
NOD.org/tracker. And we also send out, if you are interested, there's also an info button there. We can send it out in an Excel format so that you can then take the different categories that may need to go to other members of the team.
Wonderful. Great, thank you. And another question we have is, what suggestions do you have to gain leadership buy-in to complete a self-assessment?
That is a fantastic question, and I love it because there are so many different ways that we can demonstrate the value of people with disabilities in order to gain that. However, I do know it's a challenge, specifically if our companies are focused on other marginalized communities. That can sometimes be difficult. However, this has been my response previously, is that we're focused on gender and BIPOC right now. Right, all of our focus is on that. And I say, well, that's fantastic. I'm really appreciate, again, I'm going to go back to, there's no competition. However, what if I'm a woman who is part of the BIPOC community who has a disability, then I'm not able to bring my whole self to work. I'm never going to be able to bring my whole self to work. I'm going to be stressed and continue to think that I cannot identify as a person with a disability. So that's one way. Another way is if we don't understand our workforce and some of these numbers that we have, right? 7% guidance from Section 503, which is part of the laws that were changed. Those numbers come to us because we know that we probably have more than 7% of our employees within the workplace that have disabilities. We just have not made it easy or a welcoming environment for us to self-identify, or we're not tracking it. So I think one of the easiest things to do is to see if you are actually tracking self-ID first. And if you are, see if you can find out what that number is and then use that as a launching pad.
Another question that we have is for a large organization, do you have any recommendations on who the key people should be involved in completing the tracker to make sure that it's accurate?
We do, absolutely. We just had this, again, I just had this conversation before this. It should be everyone involved as far as your DEI is concerned. Usually it's the Chief Diversity Officer or the Chief Human Resources Officer that is identified within the tracker as the person responsible. And then there's someone that fills that out. But talent acquisition, HR, DEI, and your IT teams. Right. Anyone who is involved in your IT teams from an accessibility standpoint should be involved in answering those questions.
That's helpful. Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions? Looking to see if we have any hands raised. Our attendees. Okay.
Oh, I like
Let's
that.
see. Oh, no, I
There's
do.
something
Did you
that
see
just
this last
said,
one? Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if I can see that because
Okay. You want me to read it?
yes, please.
Okay. I've been helping a young man skilled in IT tech support who self-IDs with autism, and he's looking for employment. What suggestions do you have that will make him be more effective in helping this young man?
Oh, definitely IT positions are people are very interested. We do have some companies that I'd be happy to make the connection with that we have been working with. It just depends on where he is. But looking at those companies specifically that are taking the tracker or that are part of our leadership council, as well as others, right? Looking at those companies that support disability in those are some of the first companies that I would go to. I'd go to a Northrop Grumman, right? People that are really companies that are really well known for hiring, not only people with disabilities, people on the autism spectrum, EY. Gosh, there are so many, several, but I would definitely look at those. Uh, Again, those companies that are supporting organizations like ours, and we'd be happy if you wanted to reach out to us. Margaret makes connections all the time for companies.
And fantastic. Companies with neurodiverse programs. Thank you, Margaret. That's helpful. And is the list of companies, is it on your website or should?
It is. It's
Okay.
on our website. Thank
All
you.
right, great. All right, terrific. Thank you. Any other questions? I know we're coming up on time. I think then we'll go ahead and conclude. Again, Felicia, thank you so much. This has been incredibly informative, and I know now that we have it recorded, we can share it with more of the Virginia Ability membership for anyone that was not able to participate. So with that, thank you all so much for joining. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to attend the webinar.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer, for your services. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Michelle.